Hi everyone, I'm Archit Tashadri. Thanks for joining us. This is World is One News. You're watching WION. Let's get you the top stories making headlines around the world. The United States and India signed an agreement to build closer military ties. The two countries now agree to use each other's land, air, and naval bases. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry is now in India holding talks with leaders about several things, including India's diplomacy. Brazil's suspended President Dilma Rousseff presents her defense during an impeachment trial and claims her innocence. Well, the race is on to become the next UN Secretary General. The former Portuguese Prime Minister throws his name into the hat. And Russia is banned from the Winter Olympics in 2018, but Russia says it will appeal the ruling. Welcome, everyone. Those stories in just a moment, but we first start in India, where U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Commerce Secretary Penny Pritzker have started talks with the Indian government to boost business ties. Kerry met his Indian counterpart Sushma to review their commercial cooperation. They'll co-chair the second U.S.-India Strategic and Commercial Dialogue, where they'll review the progress made at several of the discussions that were made in Washington recently. The bilateral investment treaty and India's NSG bid are high on the agenda. Kerry arrived in New Delhi on Monday night for the annual U.S.-India Strategic and Commercial Dialogue. He'll also meet with India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Wednesday. Well, staying on U.S. and India, Secretary of Defense Ash Carter and his Indian counterpart Manohar Parrikar held a joint conference at the Pentagon on Monday. Now this after both countries signed an agreement towards building closer defense ties. Carter says the agreement will make the logistics of joint operations much easier and more efficient. Parrikar echoed the similar sentiments as Carter. Both sides made it very clear that the logistics agreement will not allow for basing U.S. troops out of India.
With respect to the major defense partnership agreement, that is a very substantial change. It's an enormous change from 50 years of history, and a very substantial advance over just a few months ago. And here's the gist of it. It will allow the United States and India to cooperate, which, speaking from the U.S. point of view, in a way that we do only with our closest and most long-standing allies.
Our engagement on maritime security is developing well. India and the United States have a shared interest in freedom of navigation and overflight and unimpeded commerce as part of rule-based order in Indo-Pacific. Doesn't have anything to do with the setting up of base. It's basically logistic support to each other's fleet, like supply of fuel, supply of many other things which are required for joint operations, humanitarian assistance, and many other relief operations.
Let's now go to Ramesh Ramachandran, our correspondent from New Delhi. Ramesh, bring us up to speed. What does military logistics actually mean?
Simply put, Archit, that the logistics exchange memorandum of agreement means that the forces of India and the U.S. can use each other's facilities for military purposes, ranging from docking, berthing, refueling, and replenishment of supplies. To that extent, it allows the militaries of both India and U.S. to access each other's facilities on a reciprocal basis. Now, that said, the U.S. has been pushing India to sign this agreement for a long time now. It was first discussed way back in 2004. But then Indian government had reservations on signing the agreement because of the sensitivities involved, especially that of China. But the present government, led by Prime Minister Modi, has indicated its intent to go ahead with the agreement, sign it, and broad-base the India-US ties, especially the areas of defense. So to that extent, it's a significant development, and it remains to be seen whether India and the U.S. will sign the two other foundational agreements that will allow and deepen the militaries of the two countries to cooperate and operate in a joint military exercise going forward. Archit?
All right, Ramesh, let's shift gears a little bit from military logistics to Secretary of State John Kerry. He was in Bangladesh just recently. Now he's in India to have some discussions, including with India's Prime Minister Modi. What type of talks do we expect both of them to talk, and what brings him here at this point?
Indeed, he flew in from Dhaka last night, and this afternoon he began his delegation-level talks with the Indian Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj. Both sides can be expected to discuss bilateral, regional, and global issues of interest to both countries. From the Indian perspective, India's membership of the Nuclear Suppliers Group, which has been hanging fire for a long time now, can be expected to be raised in a forceful manner by the Indian delegation. Other issues such as terrorism, the situation in Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the Asia-Pacific, and including, to some extent, India's recent references to Balochistan can be expected to figure in the discussions tangentially. In addition to that, the American side can be expected to discuss defense and security ties. So both sides are looking forward to reestablish and sort of reinforce the defense and security ties also in the area of commercial dialogue, which involves the Commerce Secretary of the U.S., Penny Pritzker, and her Indian counterpart, Nirmala Sitharaman, who are expected to discuss trade, investment, and visa issues, in addition to the long-pending demand for a bilateral investment treaty. Archit?
All right, Ramesh Ramachandran reporting for us on that. Ramesh, thank you so much for those updates. Moving along now, in a major development in the Scorpion submarine leak scandal, a temporary ban has now been placed on the Australian newspaper from releasing any more confidential data. DCNS, the French shipbuilder, had filed an injunction with the Supreme Court of New South Wales. The court ordered the shipbuilder to remove the documents from its website and hand over all the material it has to the French firm. The restriction has been put in place until Thursday. The shipbuilder claimed the leak had directly harmed the firm and its customers, spreading sensitive information. The publication was on the verge of releasing more information on the weapon systems being carried out on board the submarine. Former Portuguese Prime Minister Antonio Guterres leads a race to become the next UN Secretary General. This after a third UN Security Council secret ballot was held Monday. The ballot was cast by a 15-member council for each of the remaining candidates. The choices were encourage, discourage, or no opinion. According to diplomats, Guterres received 1 no opinion, 11 encourage, and 3 discouraged votes. He also won the first 2 rounds of the secret ballots by the Security Council. The council will continue to hold these ballots until a consensus is reached on a candidate to replace UN Chief Ban Ki-moon. The South Korean will step down at the end of this year after serving out his 2 5-year terms. Now to West Asia. Islamic State has claimed responsibility for the attack on a wedding party, this time in the Iraqi city of Karbala over the weekend. At least 15 people were killed and around 16 others were hurt. A group opened fire with machine guns and threw hand grenades at the party. Police say that of the 5 attackers who raided the celebration, 1 of them was a suicide bomber. Security forces killed all 5 attackers. The bombing is the first in the region since Iraqi forces dislodged ISIS militants from their stronghold in Fallujah. Now, as per a local agency, ISIS said the attack was carried out by 4 of its suicide fighters against a gathering of Shias. Well, staying in the region, U.S. President Barack Obama and Turkish President Erdogan will have bilateral talks before the G20 summit in China next month. The meeting will take place on the 4th of September. Now, as per the White House, Obama is also likely to have at least an informal discussion with Russian President Vladimir Putin. National Security Advisor Ben Rhodes says that Obama wants to talk with Erdogan about events in Turkey after July's attempted coup. He also wants to discuss possible ways of promoting stability in Syria. The White House says it's opposed Turkey's push in areas of northern Syria controlled by the Syrian Democratic Forces. The White House on Monday says it'll meet the goal of admitting 10,000 Syrian refugees to the U.S. ahead of time. The White House had pledged to admit about thousands of displaced Syrians during the current fiscal year. That wraps up at the end of September. Now, the last of the refugees were scheduled to arrive in the country Monday afternoon. National Security Advisor Susan Rice said the refugee admissions are only a small part of the administration's broader humanitarian efforts in Syria. The White House spokesman said the administration plans to keep the number steady at 10,000 for the next fiscal year, but it is working with Congress to increase that target by a few thousand for 2018. Well, for the first time, commercial flights are now set to start between the U.S. and Cuba. The Caribbean island has never had flights from the U.S. since 1961. It is a step towards improving relations between the two countries. JetBlue Airways will fly its first flight from Florida to Cuba to the city of Santa Clara at the end of the month on August the 31st. American Airlines will also start similar services next week. Eventually, up to 25 flights a day are expected to run between the U.S. and Cuba.
Los aeropuertos cubanos se han venido preparando sistemáticamente durante los últimos años para atender el arribo de turistas a Cuba y estos vuelos regulares se insertan dentro del funcionamiento habitual de los aeropuertos cubanos, cuya preparación de seguridad y demás se hace en cumplimiento de los estándares internacionales establecidos por las organizaciones a las cuales pertenece Cuba.
Now to South American news. Brazil suspended President Dilma Rousseff defended her record to the Senate. She said that her impeachment trial will be like an attack on the Brazilian constitution. She's accused of illegally manipulating the budget to hide a growing deficit. Here's more on the story.
Dilma Rousseff has denied any charges of breaking budgetary rules. She said her conscience was absolutely clear and that she has not committed any crime.
Excelentíssimo senhor presidente do Senado Federal, Renan Calheiros, diante das acusações que contra mim são dirigidas neste processo.
Rousseff is accused of moving funds between government budgets, which is illegal under Brazilian law.
Não pode resolver totalmente, mas vai ajudar bastante, entendeu? Alguns erros, algumas falhas que vem acontecendo pode melhorar algumas coisas.
Rousseff had been re-elected by more than 54 million voters. Thousands of people are still supporting her.
A gente sempre tem esperança. É triste estar participando desse momento. É retrocesso, a gente está triste com isso. Esperança a gente sempre tem.
Senators are cross-examining Rousseff. They are due to vote later this week. If Rousseff is convicted, the vice president will be sworn in to serve the rest of Rousseff's term. Bureau Report, WION.
Well, the atmosphere outside the Brazilian Senate remained tense as well. Supporters of suspended President Dilma Rousseff took to the streets last night against the ongoing impeachment trial. Police had to fire tear gas to control the demonstrators from burning property. You're taking a look at some of that video right now. Look at those signs there. Some of them reading out with Temer. He is the interim president. They were propped up everywhere there. Lots of violence, yelling, and chants going on in the streets. Temer has played a key role in Rousseff's impeachment proceedings. A strong typhoon was on course for a direct hit on northeastern Japan, but reports suggest that it may have sidestepped Tokyo. Packing wind gusts of up to 180 kilometers an hour, the storm is expected to make landfall in the northeast later on in the day. Authorities have issued warnings for torrential rain, high waves, and flooding along the Pacific coast. Some 110 domestic flights have already been canceled. Typhoon Line Rock, which formed more than 10 days ago, has become the longest-lasting typhoon, breaking a 46-year-old record. Boeing has decided to refrain from increasing jetliner prices as the industry grapples with a slowdown in new plane sales. A company spokesperson said Boeing will continue to quote last year, July 2015 base prices for any new orders. So far, they've only gotten about 335 planes, which is much fewer than the 418 jetliners it booked in the first 7 months of 2015. Boeing's list of prices range from about $80 million for small jets to about $400 million for the larger ones. Airbus sales have also dropped. Both major plane makers say they may have to cut down some of the production of their aircrafts. Well, days after Indian wrestler Yogeshwar Dutt returned home from a disappointing performance at the Rio Games with no medal, unfortunately, he may be in for a pleasant surprise. Dutt's bronze medal from the London 2012 Games is expected to be upgraded now to silver. This because medalist Besik Kudakov from Russia tested positive to a dope test. Dutt may see a change in the status of his medal. Kudakov died in a car accident at the age of 27, a year after the Olympics. Now, this ahead of the Rio Games next month, the International Olympic Committee retested his sample, which was collected during the London Games. Now, all of this is part of a standard operating procedure where samples can be stored for up to 10 years to check for doping. Once the upgrade is officially announced, Yogeshwar will join wrestler Sushil Kumar and shooter Vijay Kumar as silver recipients for India from the London Games. All right, now moving along to tennis. Indian tennis player Saket Maineni put on an inspired performance in his first round match against Czech Yuri Vesely. Maineni went down fighting the competition. His grueling 5-set battle against Vesely lasted just under 4 hours. Maineni is India's first representative at the U.S. Open singles competition since Somdev Devaraman. Well, staying with the U.S. Open, world number one Novak Djokovic began the defense for his title, a labored win over Poland's Jerzy Janowicz. The match brought the focus back on the Serb's fitness after a sizzling start to the season that included 2 Grand Slam wins. Djokovic has seen a shocking drop in form. Arriving at Flushing Meadows, Djokovic had struggled with a left wrist injury and some other issues as well. His supporters had more reason to worry as trainers were called out early in the opening set of his first-round match to work on his right forearm. Djokovic made a third-round exit at the Wimbledon this year. He also suffered a shock first-round defeat at the 2016 Rio Olympics. All right, now Manchester United striker Wayne Rooney will stay on as England captain under new manager Sam Allardyce. Rooney is set to become England's most capped outfield player. He took over as captain from Steven Gerrard in 2014. The football player will make his 116th international appearance against Slovakia on Sunday. If he plays that World Cup qualifier, he will overtake David Beckham's 115 caps for England. Well, in another blow to Russian sport, the country now finds itself banned from the 2018 Winter Paralympic Games. The ban relates to state-sponsored doping allegations. Russia's para-athletes already stand suspended from next month's Rio Paralympics. The Russian Paralympic Committee announced this latest punishment handed out by the International Paralympic Committee Monday. Last week, sport's highest tribunal, the Court of Arbitration for Sport, rejected Russia's appeal against the ban. The Swiss Federal Court will now decide on Russia's appeal against these sanctions. The ruling is expected later this week. All right, moving on. A town in northern Wales is now known for its rather interesting snorkeling contest. But this is no ordinary snorkeling competition. Contestants in this event have to power their way through a slushy bog if they have any chance of claiming the title.
Go. Participants in the Bog Snorkeling World Championship jump into a slushy bog and swim their way through it. The competitors have to swim up and down 60 yards to win the title.
Most of them who do a good time, the good swimmers, they have their arms out in front of them. They're not using their arms at all and just not going too quickly to begin. Because many, they have a good time on the first lap, but going back they get really, really tired.
The concept was first introduced by locals in the 1980s. They came up with an unusual way to fundraise for charity.
Oh, it's amazing, this event, and I felt it was very fun to swim in the boat.
There was a dramatic turn of events even this year after it started pouring. Rain showers with moments of sunshine made the event even more fun.
The technique was just head down and paddle those legs like crazy. One thing that was a surprise to me was the sun. The sun came out, the water was actually quite warm, wasn't that cold, and I could just hear the roars of the crowd cheering me on, and that sort of willed me to get to the other end and back.
18-year-old Dan Norman from Wolverhampton won this year's event. He clocked 1 minute and 26 seconds to win the race.
Yeah, I wasn't really expecting it, seeing it was like the first time I'd ever done it. I knew I was like decent at swimming, but I didn't know if there'd be anyone better here.
Competitors from far-off places like New Zealand and Sweden also took part in the race.
Really easy to get into the zone and just keep going. Put your arms forward and just remember to keep kicking, breathing. But pop your head up so that you see the post and don't overshoot it, because that's what I did, and then I swam under the thing on the way back as well. But good, everyone should try it.
And it wasn't just the event that was weird. This year saw some really quirky outfits as well. Bureau Report, Beyond.
And that is our bulletin for right now. Don't forget you can track all of our stories on our digital, mobile, and social media platforms. I'm Archit Seshadri. Thanks for watching WION. We'll be right back.